If you want to get creative with some tulips and some hyacinths from a supermarket, then stay with me and watch our tutorial. Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of our tutorials. Now it's a gorgeous day today, the sun is shining, storms are coming tomorrow, but at least we've got a beautiful day today. Now I'm going to use one of my vintage containers. I've been in the charity shops again and I found this wonderful glass bowl, lots of texture, quite deep, so good for arranging flowers in. And rather than using floral foam, I'm going to use a grid to hold my flowers into place. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Now I've chosen this time to use some supermarket flowers. So I've got some wonderful hyacinths. I nearly called it hydrangea. Wonderful hyacinth. And I happen to be matching today, so I've planned that out really well. Amazing fragrance from them. Really good lasting flower. And, you know, an epitome of the springtime. I really love the hyacinths. And then to complement them, I have a soft pink tulip, and I've bought these in a bunch together. So just your ordinary supermarket bunch, nothing unusual or nothing that you can't get hold of yourself. And if it's not identical choice, you could have irises, daffodils this time of the year. You might even have small flowers already coming up in the garden. Then you can use those and they will work just as well. So for those of you who struggle to get foliage, then this is going to be a good design. And what I do have, which you might not be able to get hold of yourself, is a fantastic pink pussy willow. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Now, I've had these in for orders in the shop and I couldn't resist showing it to you. I know maybe you can't get hold of it yourself, but you will get catkins and pussy willows this time of the year growing in the garden. And of course, if you haven't met me before, my name is Sharon and I'm based in South Wales. You can probably tell by my accent. We have currently catkins and pussy willows growing in the woodland areas. You might have them in the garden, but you can also pick this up from the supermarket, but in a white colour. So you might not get this really interesting pink shade, but isn't that amazing? It's nice to see something different, even if you can't get hold of them yourself. Fantastic. And that colour combination is going to work really well together. Now what I've done, to avoid using floral foam, but to give myself a structure to hold my flowers into place, I've made a grid effect. So you'll see here, and what I'll do, if I hold it up here, so there's a clear background, we can zoom in on it so you can see it up close. I've used different types of branches, some birch, we've got some lichenized branches in there. I've also got a bit of ivy root, which is the paler colour. And I've twisted it all together to create a support, almost like a support network or a framework to hold my flowers into place. And this works really well if you're learning how to do a hand tie as well. And hopefully I can get to show you that at a later date. But I've just used lots of branches, twigs, anything that's lying around that's a little bit flexible. And I've tied them together in various points to give me a really secure structure. I think we might have one here that's slightly moved out of position. And then what I'll do with that is just sit it on top of my container. Nothing too technical, nothing too advanced, and try and get it central. And again, I haven't put water in my vase yet so that you can see when I tip it forward, I don't have any water leaking out anywhere. So it's a really simple structure, and I've gone about 2 inches wider than my container, maybe 3 inches, but that's going to give me a really good support for my flowers to go into the container. I don't use any floral foam, and it's quite an environmentally friendly and sustainable option, and something that you can reuse over and over and over again in different containers. If you're using a long and narrow container, you can still do this grid effect, but by making your grid rectangle rather than square like I've done here. So if I just show you these few pieces here, this is pretty much how I started, with a very simple structure. This one, I've used decorative florist wire in pink, and that would have coordinated really well with my colour choice today. So I've got pink wire here holding the birch twigs into place. So I keep adding until I have a size that sits really comfortably on top of my container. And for this one, I've used raffia because I felt it was more in keeping with the colour tones that I've got there in the wood. And that's the basic structure. And if we just turn it round, you can see that there's no perfect shape to it. It's fairly symmetrical in size on the container, so I've tried to even it out on my glass base. And that would work really well in the centre of a table. So I'm going to start with a hyacinth. Such a shame that you can't smell them because the perfume is absolutely fantastic. I think they're probably going to be too long the size that they've come out of the packet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut about 1 inch off the bottom. And you'll see with the hyacinth at the base here, you have almost a white section of the stem. And that's better off removed from the stem because the flower head will absorb more water if we remove this section here, which is part of the bulb. So I'm going to cut that off. So I've made my little hyacinth about 1 inch shorter than it was originally. And when you're working with spring flowers, they're soft stemmed, you are better off using a craft knife or a florist knife. Because the scissors is quite forceful, it tends to damage the end of the soft stem flowers. So anything that we refer to as soft stem, tulips, irises, daffodils, snowdrops, maybe bluebells, those type of flowers are better off cut with a sharp knife because you don't cause so much damage to the end of the hyacinth. But for today, for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to use a sharp scissors. I'm removing that bottom section there. And the larger of the flowers, so the larger flowers for me are the hyacinth. And I'm going to work those more towards the middle of my arrangement. And what I'm doing is using that structure, we tip it forward, I'm using the framework of the branches to hold them into place. And I don't want to make it too perfect and too matching because again, simple little flowers, garden type flowers, I want it to be quite natural and quite relaxed. 4 in there, I've got another 2 to go. So I'm just trying to fairly evenly spread them out so they're not too close together. And I think we might have to go a little bit shorter with that one. So we'll take a little bit off the end and I'm going to work my way round, just trying to make them fairly evenly balanced. And one of the benefits of working without foam is if you feel the flowers are too close together, you can take them out and pop them back in. And again, we'll just hold that into place and I can tip that forward for you to see how that's coming together. Really simple little design. Now for the tulip. Lots of you might be thinking, I don't like to use tulips because they're difficult and they've got a mind of their own and they like to twist and turn in different directions. And that is because they are phototropic and they like to move towards the light. So the light in the video that I'm doing today is on my right hand side here. So if I was going to place this arrangement on a table in this position at home, the tulips would eventually turn towards the light because that's their natural habit to move towards the light. So to prevent that from happening, it's a really good idea to just keep turning your vase around and it'll prevent them all moving in the same direction. So just one little tip. And then also, if you get that problem where the tulips flop over the side of your container, then they really need to have a good drink. So what I would suggest is wrap your tulips tight in some newspaper or in the packaging that you've bought them in, and then cut a good inch off the bottom and leave them in deep water overnight in the dark so that they're wrapped nice and snugly and tight together. And you'll find that when you open them the following morning, they'll be standing up like soldiers, just like this. Now there are a few old wives' tales. Some people tell you to insert a pin through the head there. It's never worked for me, but it does work for lots of people. And a friend of mine is adamant that if you put a copper coin in the bottom of your container, that also helps to keep those tulips nice and straight. So a few little tips. Keep them away from direct light or keep turning them around, and wrap them tightly overnight before you arrange them in your vase, and hopefully they'll behave themselves. So I'm going to do the same now with the tulips, just roughly work out how long we want them to be, and I think that's quite a good size. And I don't want to hide that framework, it's part of the design, I want you to be able to see it. So I'm not going to overfill with lots and lots of different types of flowers. Remembering when you're arranging in water to make sure that you've removed any of the foliage from below the waterline, so that it keeps the water fresh and clean and it stops it becoming too slimy and, you know, really ugly looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the tulips to the same sort of length. So I'm using this one as a guide, and I'm going to cut them all so that I know when I place them into the design, it's going to end up with a fairly circular shape. I'm not going to have any that are too long or too short within the design. And another little tip for arranging with tulips is they continue to grow after they've been taken from the mother plant. So when they've been cut from the bulb, they continue to grow up to about 4 inches. Now I love that about tulips because I think it's their own personality, and I love the way they bend and they twist as they go into an arrangement. So, you know, if you're buying them and you wonder why on earth they've grown and they've changed the position that they're in, then it's because they're moving towards the light and they're continuing to grow when they've been taken from the plant. Now, because I've cut them, I've already got them a similar length, so don't have to worry too much about placing them in. And remember, remove that foliage from below the waterline, and I'm going to keep going around until I've got an even distribution of the colour. Now I'm not too worried about making it perfectly symmetrical, because I think with these very sweet little flowers, the spring flowers that we've got access to at the moment, I think they look nicer when they're arranged very innocently and very softly, and we don't try and force them into a shape that they don't want to go. So I'm just trimming a few shorter pieces for the centre, and they're almost now holding each other into position, that the stems are placed at the bottom, they've fed through one another, and we've got a design that's almost holding itself up on its own. So that's the 2 flower types. And of course, I've left enough space in between the hyacinths for them to open more, because they're going to explode and have an amazing size head. They're going to get quite big as they continue to open. And again, we'll try tipping it forward. Hopefully you can see there, quite simple, of this wonderful catkin. So this one is one of the pussy willows. It's one of the Salix. Gorgeous texture on it, quite silky, fluffy, really tactile. And I think I'm going to go with 5 pieces. I don't think I need to have an awful lot more. And you can see I've gone slightly taller with these, and that's because it's a line material, so it draws your eye away from the centre. You've heard me talk about line a lot in arranging. So we'll get the larger shapes in the middle, which are the rounds, and then we'll get the longer line material towards the outside. I'm going to go just find a shorter piece, and one that's a bit straighter for the centre. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add another one in just on this side here, so I've got a more even distribution of this really fluffy texture. And one of the benefits of this design is, as the flowers fade away and they die off, tulips might die first, but you still might have some gorgeous hyacinths in there. So when the tulips die, you can add another flower, and you can just keep adding. Change the water, use the flower food that your florist or your supermarket have provided with the flowers. Keep changing the water, add that flower food, and you can keep replacing it. And it's almost like an everlasting design that's going to go on and on and on. And if you've got small containers, So it could be a little sundae dish that you would put your ice cream in, could be a small glass or a small bowl of some description. You could use a much smaller version of the framework, and then you could use those small flowers that are quite hard to arrange. So primulas, primroses, snowdrops, those little narcissi, you might have some small irises in your garden, and it's a really good way of showing them off to their best advantage. So I'm hoping you've enjoyed that one. That might be the quickest video I've ever done, but a simple design using a really soft colour palette, blends beautifully with my jumper. A vintage container that you can pick up quite easily in a charity shop, and some branches or some twigs that you might have in the garden. So get creative and have a little go. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the videos, to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell to be notified every time I upload a new tutorial, and please comment in the box below. Let me know what you like, or maybe what you dislike, what you'd like to see, and I love to know what part of the world you're coming from. We're also considering doing a few live videos where you can ask questions as I'm doing some arranging. So please, if you'd like to see a live tutorial, then put it in the box below and we can plan some dates for later in the year. So thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.